It was a quiet weekend that ended up changing everything for me. At 54, I'd always played it safe, kept to the routine, loved the calm, never expecting that anything could shake me. But when my nephew, Cody, came to stay, something shifted. I never imagined it could happen to me, and I don't want you to make the same mistake I did. I'm 54 years old, and for most of my life, I've followed the rules. I married young, raised two daughters, stayed in the same town where I grew up, and worked as a school librarian for over 20 years. I always believed in keeping things steady, safe. Love to me was quiet and dependable, not wild or surprising. I liked knowing what came next. But one weekend, everything changed. I never thought anything like this could happen to me. Please, don't make the same mistake I did. It all started with a phone call from my cousin Melanie. She was in a tight spot. Her ex-husband had backed out of picking up their son, Cody, for the weekend. She had to leave town for a work conference, and she needed someone to take care of him. Melanie and I weren't especially close growing up, but over the years, we'd reconnected through family events and holiday calls. So, when she asked if Cody could stay at my house until Sunday, I didn't hesitate. I had the space, and I figured it'd be nice to have some company. Cody was always polite and soft-spoken, the kind of teenager who could easily fade into the background of a room full of noisy relatives. He was 17, tall, lanky, with deep eyes that always seemed like he was thinking about something more than he let on. He reminded me a bit of my younger daughter's first boyfriend. Quiet, respectful, always observing. When Cody arrived that Friday evening, he had his duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He greeted me with a shy smile. "Hey, Aunt Carol, thanks for letting me crash here." I smiled back. "Of course, sweetie, make yourself at home." I'd made homemade lasagna, something warm and familiar, and we ate dinner at the kitchen island, just the two of us. My house had been quiet for years, ever since the girls moved out. It's one of those cozy ranch-style homes, always smelling faintly of vanilla and old wood. That night, it felt a little less still. We talked about school, music, and even a little about how he was adjusting after his parents' divorce. His voice was low, thoughtful, nothing like most teenage boys. He actually listened. I remember noticing that, thinking how rare that kind of quiet attention had become in my world. Later, I set up the guest room for him. Fresh sheets, extra pillows, a little basket of toiletries I always keep on hand for visitors. He thanked me again, so earnestly that it caught me off guard. There was something in the way he looked at me, like he saw more than just an older woman doing a favor. I brushed it off. I changed into my usual soft cotton pajamas, nothing fancy, just something loose and comfortable, and settled into the den with a glass of wine. It was just past 10 when I heard a gentle knock at the archway. "Hey," Cody said, peeking in. "Do you mind if I sit in here with you for a bit?" "I'm not really tired." "Sure," I said, patting the end of the couch. "It's nice to have someone around, to be honest." He walked in slowly, holding a blanket around his shoulders like a cape. He looked younger in that moment, like a kid again. But when he sat down just a foot away from me, I felt a strange flutter in my chest. It made no sense, so I swallowed it. We put on a nature documentary, something with slow-moving herds and whispery narration, but I didn't really watch. I was too aware of the subtle warmth between us, the quiet breaths, the way the couch cushion shifted every time he adjusted his posture. At one point, my hand was resting on the couch between us, and his arm brushed against it lightly, deliberately. I wasn't sure what to make of it. I looked over at him, and he was already looking at me. There was nothing inappropriate in his eyes. No boldness, no arrogance, just quiet, almost vulnerable openness, like he was waiting for me to look away. But I didn't. We held that gaze for a second longer than we should have. Then I broke it with a soft chuckle, more to reset the moment than anything. "Tired yet?" I asked. He shrugged a little. "You've got a cozy bed waiting for you." "Yeah," he said, standing slowly, the blanket slipping off his shoulder. Thanks again for everything." When he turned to leave, he hesitated just slightly, then walked out of the room. I sat there, stunned by a wave of feelings I hadn't expected. Guilt, confusion, a strange longing I hadn't felt in years. I didn't know what any of it meant, but something had shifted that night. something unspoken but very real. And I wasn't sure what I was more afraid of, that he felt it too, or that I had imagined it entirely. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. My mind had been restless all night, turning over every moment from the night before. The way Cody looked at me, that soft brush of skin, the hesitation in his step as he left the room, I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination, a projection of loneliness. That quiet ache that builds after years of living alone and not even realizing how long it's been since someone really saw you. I tied my robe and padded into the kitchen, starting the coffee machine and pulling out the eggs and toast. The house still held the chill of early morning, so I left the back door cracked just enough to let in the scent of dew-soaked grass. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps behind me. "A morning," Cody said, his voice still rough with sleep. He was wearing an old t-shirt and sweatpants hair tousled. He looked so young, but something in his eyes made him seem older than he should have been. That quiet, observant thing again. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said, trying to sound casual. "You sleep okay?" "Yeah," he said, sliding onto the bar stool. "Better than I thought I would." I set a plate in front of him and poured 2 mugs of coffee, one black, one with a splash of cream for me. We ate quietly at first, the kind of silence that didn't feel heavy, just full of things unspoken. Then he said something that caught me completely off guard. "You seemed sad last night." I blinked. "Sad?" He nodded. Not like crying or anything, just lonely. The words hit deeper than I expected. I looked at him, searching for some trace of mockery, but he was completely serious. "Oh," I said after a pause, "you're not wrong." I hadn't meant to say it, at least not like that, but it was true, and I felt tired of pretending it wasn't. He gave me a small, thoughtful nod and didn't push. Just kept sipping his coffee. The day passed in small, ordinary ways. He helped me sweep the back patio, and I showed him how to make my mother's lemon bars. We talked about books, music, even his dream of maybe becoming a graphic designer someday. The age gap between us felt like it melted a little under the weight of honesty. Later that afternoon, a thunderstorm rolled in, thick clouds, deep rumbling in the distance. I lit a few candles and put on a soft playlist, the kind with old Motown tracks and warm piano chords. It turned the house into something softer, dreamier. Cody was sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, flipping through a photo album I'd pulled from the bookshelf. One of the old ones, back when my girls were young, before the divorce, before everything changed. "You look really happy here," he said, pointing to a photo of me and the girls at the beach. I said quietly. "It was a good day." "You still have that smile sometimes," he said. I looked at him. "What smile?" "That one you had in the photo. Like the world surprised you in a good way." My throat tightened. No one had said something like that to me in years. I sat down beside him on the rug, feeling the warmth of the candles, the soft weight of memory pressing in. Cody," I said, "can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Last night, when we were watching that documentary, was I imagining things?" He looked at me for a long second, then shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "You weren't." That silence again, heavy charge. But he added gently, "I wasn't going to say anything. I didn't want to make you uncomfortable." "You didn't," I whispered. "It was just unexpected." We were sitting closer now, too close, but I didn't move. Neither did he. "I don't know what's happening," I said, my voice low. "You just know that it's been a long time since I felt seen, and last night I felt something shift." He nodded. "And me too." I looked at him, at the soft edges of boyhood still clinging to him and the emerging outline of the man he was becoming. And I felt this sharp ache, not of desire exactly, but of recognition, of connection. Two people who hadn't expected to find each other in that moment, but somehow had. I stood slowly. "We should get some rest tonight. It's been a strange day." "Yeah," he said, standing too, his voice soft. "A strange, but kind of good too." As he turned to go, I reached out just briefly and touched his arm. Thank you," I said. He looked at me. For what? For seeing me." He gave a small, almost solemn smile. "Any time." And then he was gone, down the hallway, and I was left standing in the flickering candlelight, heart beating in a way I hadn't felt in years. The rain was still coming down the next morning, light and steady. It tapped against the windows like a gentle reminder that the outside world was still turning, even though everything inside me felt like it had paused. I stayed in bed a little longer than usual, staring at the ceiling, my hands resting on my stomach. There was a strange mix of calm and tension in my body, as if something had been set in motion, and I didn't know how to stop it, or even if I wanted to. When I finally walked into the kitchen, Cody was already there, flipping pancakes in the skillet like he'd been doing it all his life. He was barefoot, hair damp from the shower, and humming something soft under his breath. He turned when he heard me. "A morning," he said with a warm smile. "Hope you don't mind. I figured you deserved breakfast made for you." That made me laugh, a short, surprised sound. I could get used to this. He placed a plate in front of me, golden pancakes topped with fresh fruit. "Then let me spoil you while I'm here." The way he said it was gentle, but something in his voice lingered, that thread of tension again, soft but unmistakable. We ate slowly, talking about nothing at first. Rainey's upcoming finals, a new band he'd been listening to. But every now and then, I'd catch his eyes on me, watching like he was waiting for something or maybe hoping I'd say something first. I didn't, not yet. After breakfast, I asked if he wanted to help me reorganize the upstairs hallway closet, something I'd been putting off for years. He agreed right away. I think we both needed the distraction. We worked side by side for hours, pulling out boxes filled with old holiday decorations, photos, forgotten sweaters. At one point, I found a dusty shoebox full of letters from my ex-husband, sweet, clumsy notes from the early years of our marriage. I stared at them for a long moment before gently closing the lid and setting it aside. Cody noticed. "Oh, was it hard?" he asked, letting go. "No," I said, being left. It caught me. I looked at him. He wasn't teasing. He wasn't judging. He was asking like someone who genuinely wanted to understand. "Harder than I ever let on," I said. "But eventually you stop looking for what left. You just learn how to live with the space it used to fill." He nodded. "I think I get that. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was..." But suddenly we were standing closer than before, the air between us thicker, heavier. I reached for a blanket on the shelf above us, and my hand brushed against his. We both paused, frozen in that contact. He looked up at me, rash. A Carol. My name in his voice made something flutter deep inside me. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Instead, I stepped back slowly, deliberately, until I sat down on the edge of the hallway bench. The light from the window behind him fell across his face, catching the uncertainty there, but also the hope. "Sit," I said gently. He did, kneeling in front of me like he was afraid a single wrong move would shatter whatever this fragile moment had become. "I've been trying to understand what this is," I whispered. "And it doesn't make sense, Cody. It's unexpected, it's strange, but it's also honest." He nodded, his hands resting on his thighs, waiting. "I've spent so many years trying to be who I'm supposed to be," I said. "And for one weekend, I want to stop pretending I don't feel things." There was a silence between us, not awkward but tender, filled with possibility. "I'm not asking for anything," he said. "I just wanted you to know that being around you feels different, safe, real." That word, real, plumbed to the walls of my heart. Then softly, his hand found mine. Not rushed, not demanding, just connection. And I let it stay there. We didn't say much more that afternoon. We went back to sorting boxes, but the energy had changed. We were careful with each other. Every word, every glance carried a new weight. There was something delicate about the day, like a tightrope stretched between two hearts that hadn't expected to meet in the middle. As evening fell and the rain finally stopped, we sat on the front porch wrapped in blankets, sipping tea, watching the last of the clouds roll past. "I leave tomorrow," he said quietly. "I know. You okay with that?" I looked at him. "I don't know," I said. "Oh, but I know I'll remember this," he smiled. "And me too. And for the first time in years, I felt something close to whole. Not because I had found someone to complete me, but because someone had seen me exactly as I was, and still chose to stay for a while, even if, just for one weekend." Sunday morning arrived like the gentle exhale after a long breath, still soft and filled with that unspoken heaviness of a goodbye. I stood at the kitchen counter, pouring the last of the orange juice into 2 glasses. Cody was upstairs, finishing packing his bag. The house already felt emptier, though we hadn't even left yet. The air between us had changed. Not in a loud or dramatic way, but in a quiet, settled kind of way. Something had been spoken even without many words, and something had been felt deeply in a place I hadn't touched in years. He came down the stairs, duffels slung over his shoulder, his hoodie sleeves pushed halfway up his forearms. He looked every bit the teenager he was, and yet something in his eyes felt older. Maybe because of what we shared, or maybe just because I was finally seeing him without the filter of what was appropriate or expected. "Car's coming in 20, I said, sliding a glass toward him. "Thanks," he replied softly. We drank in silence, watching the sunlight stretch through the kitchen window. Listen, the rain had finally stopped, and the whole backyard shimmered with that just-washed glow. "Lee, don't really know what to say," Cody said finally. "You don't have to say anything," I replied. "And not today." He looked at me then, not with hesitation, not with confusion, but with a calm steadiness I wasn't expecting. "I think I'll always remember this weekend." I nodded. "Oh, me too." There was a long pause, the kind that doesn't need to be filled, just held. He reached across the counter, his fingers brushing mine one last touch, soft and intentional. It didn't linger, but it stayed with me. I walked him to the door, and we stood there a moment before opening it. He turned to me. Can I ask you one thing?" "Of course. Do you regret any of it?" My throat tightened. I thought about everything, the quiet conversations, the emotional connection, that fragile spark of something more, and how for once I had let myself feel without apology. "No," I said, "I don't regret it, but I also know it can't be more than what it was." He nodded slowly. "I understand." We hugged, a long, silent embrace. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't familial either. It was something entirely its own. The car pulled up, and he walked toward it without looking back. I stood at the door, arms wrapped around myself, and watched as he disappeared down the quiet street. When I went back inside, the house felt still again. But I wasn't the same woman I had been on Friday. Later that night, I sat on the couch, the same one we had shared that first evening, and let myself feel the quiet hum of something I had almost forgotten. The sense that I was still capable of being moved, that even in the second half of life, new things can surprise you. Not always the way you expect. Not always in ways you can explain. But they matter. I don't know if I'll ever see Cody the same way again, or if we'll ever talk about that weekend. What I do know is that for those few days, I let my heart speak again. I let someone see the woman beneath the years, beneath the routine, beneath the silence.